How's it hanging? There are many ways to juice up your game. Some might call it polish, but I think it's more specific than that. It's about player feedback, a term you probably heard about if you watched game dev content before. That's why I spare you the details. In short, game go meep meep zeep, PP go boom. At least that's how I react to good player feedback. It's totally normal, right? Well, today we'll look at some of the changes I've made to Aestik regarding that juice. It's not the first time I reiterated on that, but that's just how it goes. Aestik actually used to look like this. And then this. And now this. As you can tell, the game is constantly improving. I will also talk about some changes regarding general polish later on. Most of the steps I took were quite simple but effective, so without further ado, let's get into it. One of the more obvious changes I've made are these white particles that spawn when you hit an enemy. The direction of their movement depends on the direction the player attacks from. To keep that simple, I just created 4 different particle systems. I guess that most programmers would prefer to just make those changes using code. However, I don't. I keep getting amazed by how many different solutions to simple problems like this exist, and while it certainly is important to choose wisely, it often just comes down to personal preference. And you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Unity's particle system has this cool feature that allows you to play frames of animation over the lifetime of the particle. That's what I used for the animation. It's really simple, but it works perfectly fine for my purposes. I also added a white unlit material as I wasn't too happy with the black outlines I created in the first place. Actually, I added the same material to every hit of slash animation in the game. I got some feedback regarding the black outlines of those effects early on, but it took me a while to think about it and see the problems for myself. Thanks for your feedback, by the way. It's always helpful to learn about your thoughts about the game. Well, at least as long as it isn't something like that. Alright, yeah, I guess I should start over and make a new game. The last 2 years probably weren't even worth it, right? Why should anyone even want to play a hand-drawn Metroidvania like Aestik? There's probably not even a community for this genre. I mean, I don't even know any Metroidvanias aside from Hollow Knight, so why bother? Maybe I should just quit and start working as a traveling salesman or something like that. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Well, I guess that's it then. JK. Yeah. Along with the visuals, I also reworked some sound effects. I recently watched a video about the creation process of Mortal Kombat sound design. That got me inspired. So I bought a paprika, squeezed the shit out of it, edited it, and used some sound effects and filters. Thus, the new hit sound effects were created. Also, while at it, I changed some other effects too. Another thing I finally did, and I really wanted to do that for a long time, was creating death and spawn animations for the player character. Before, I just reused the hurt animation and made the sprite fade out, which looked kinda cheap but worked fine as a temporary solution. But now, I made these stylish animations utilizing the code of the main character in a cool way. I'm really happy with the outcome, and it actually didn't even take me too much time. I guess that the routine of animating like that in Photoshop pays off. Okay, now that the player feedback, aka juice, is covered, we can look at the more general changes that were made to Aestik. First of all, there's a tutorial. Finally. I've been thinking about how to implement instructions seamlessly into the gameplay for a while. I think that heavy text boxes explaining the game's mechanics are almost always a bad idea, so I decided to just explain the controls step by step inside the actual gameplay. I made text objects pop up when the player is close enough. The texts always explain an action the player can take at that moment, so they should immediately understand the mechanics behind it. I also had to create a script to identify whether the player uses a gamepad or a keyboard, which took insanely long due to my own stupidity. It was one of those problems you could have solved within seconds if you weren't an idiot, but I guess sometimes I am. But other times I'm not, so I solved it, hated myself for a second, and then moved on. To make sure the text objects don't show up every time the player goes back to the starting area, I added a variable to my save system that changes when the player completes the tutorial, so that's done for now. Another quite big change was the main menu overhaul. Before, I just used a piece of concept art as a background image for the menu. It looked kinda fine, but I certainly wasn't too happy with it, so it needed to be reworked. I wanted to bring more life and movement into the title screen, so I decided to show parts of the in-game environment as well as an NPC. To make it a little more interesting, there are a bunch of different NPCs that have a chance to appear in the main menu, so it's not always the same. Also, some of the Bubblewood's wobbleflies randomly spawn and move across the screen, which further elevates my plan to bring life to the main menu. I also created the new main menu / main theme for Aestik. It fits the mood better and still features the leitmotifs I established within the soundtrack. I'll let some of it play during the end screen of this video if you're interested. Alright, there's one more addition to the game. An intro scene. Most games have something like that when you start the game for the first time. It's a great way to immediately immerse the players in the game's world and potentially give some context or at least provide them with a rough idea on the story. I did think about just creating a whole animated cutscene, but then decided to make it a little more interactive, if you can call it that. The lone traveler, who is the main protagonist of the game, appears on the screen sitting in a boat and slowly approaching the coast. The moving assets in the front and background are getting randomly instantiated, so the scene can technically loop for eternity. But don't worry, I've made sure to destroy the objects at a certain point, so it won't destroy your PC if you decide to wait forever. Whatever actually makes you want to do that. After a while, text appears on the screen. By hitting space, the next sentence gets triggered. That way everyone can read it at their own pace. When the last sentence is finished, the end of the scene will be triggered by the traveler disappearing behind a bush in the foreground. Writing the script for the scene wasn't too much of a hassle, as they only have to handle pretty simple operations. But what actually took most of the time was the creation of the art assets. I drew all of them from scratch to create an atmospheric and unique scene. At least I might be able to reuse some of them later on. We'll see. I also created a new ambience track that plays in the background and discreetly features some of the main theme's melodies. So that's it for now. If you want to see the changes for yourself, you can play the latest version of the official Aestik demo. I just updated it. To do that, you can join the Aestik Discord server where you can find the link to the demo. The invitation link's in the description. And if you like my content and want to see more Aestik related videos, please like and subscribe to my